Peace, love, and light. Family, was good, does nation. Shout out to the gang, man, for real. Appreciate all you guys. So today's video is a topic that I got asked from a couple of people, including my father. I've been asked by subscribers on this topic, so I'm gonna try to make this one as quick as possible. And my hopes for this video is not to tell you what to think, but simply to spark a thought and evoke an emotion in you that's going to lead you down the path of searching, doing research for your personal enlightenment. Okay, so as I always do on this channel, I always tell you guys to do your own research and don't take what I'm saying for face value, but to come back to this channel and fact check me if I'm lying. Go do the research and go on a search engine that's not censored like Google. You can go on Bing or search engines like that. Also read accredited books from accredited scholars and researchers of multiple different backgrounds, not just European background. Okay, so the topic for this video is, you know, if Africans were so great, how did they fall? How did we fall? How did we become conquered? And how did we become at the, you know, perceived as the lowest of the low? Now, this is a good question. One thing I want to bring up is that African people are so diverse. There's not just one type of African. I said it before, there's over 3,500 African languages. There's multiple different backgrounds and tribes and things of that nature. Now, if you observe North Africa in modern day time, you'll see that they're not even black. They're heavily mixed, descendants of Romans, descendants of Greeks, descendants of Spanish, descendants of, you know, Eurasian people, right? And so one thing that I want to bring up is the African people, and by African people I'm talking about Kemetu, which translates to black people, or Memphites, Thebians, Cushites, which translates to literally people like me. We were avid travelers and avid traders. Okay, it's no secret anymore that we already, you know, traveled across the whole world prior to what they tell us in 1492, Christopher Columbus finding the New World, when it was already inhabited by African melanated people. In fact, the first island that Christopher Columbus went to when he went on his voyage was to the island of Hispaniola, which is modern day Haiti and Dominican Republic, and he actually had the help from an African that had to show him how to get there. And when they got there, they were met by the Taino natives, and they had these gold coins and gold pieces. And when Christopher Columbus and of course his people asked them, where did you get these gold pieces, they told them that, oh, there were these other, you know, Africans that came that brought this here in good fellowship and left these here for us. And so when we understand that, we can understand that Africans were always traders. They were eager traders. And so when the Eurasian came over to the border, coming as, you know, traders, it's not something that happened, you know, like that. It took time as the Africans got, you know, a little bit more familiar with the Eurasians. You know, they started to bring their beliefs with their trades and their products. They started to bring their beliefs with their trades. They started to, you know, eventually send out missionaries. And we have to always be wary of missionaries because it's right in the word. They're on a mission, right? And so what happened was, as these Eurasians made it deeper into the African territory, they started to observe the actions and study them, right? And so they would go back to their kingdoms and their land, and they would tell the stories to the people about, oh, how they had all these resources, and they're sort of primitive in a sense because they're not using their resources for the masses to outsiders, but they were rather just keeping them there, kind of like preserving, like we used all the gold and the copper and all that stuff, but it wasn't to a point where, you know, we were exploiting the earth, because we were on one accord with the earth vibrationally. And so what started to happen is, as the Europeans started to get more into African soil and territory, of course they brought ideas, and things started to change. Certain Africans started to adopt different ideologies of those people and things of that nature. And so as that started to happen, you know, slowly but surely they started to get conquered. Now, Africans, yes, we had great armies, we had technology, despite what they tell us, but it is, from my belief, based off of my research, you can feel free to disagree and go do your research. I believe that we were ready for war with tribes like ourselves. We had our spears, we had all of these different things, especially guerrilla warfare tactics. But I do not believe that we were ready for people that had guns or stuff like that. So we were ready for warfare with tribes like us. But I believe what happened was, through many different avenues, they were able to come through and conquer. One of those avenues was religion. They were able to bring in their you know, Muslim, Christianity, things of that nature, because we must remember that Arabs are Caucasoid type of people. There are Eurasian people, and they still follow the age-old tradition of covering their face from the scorching sun. Now, as I always tell you guys, you know, as a scholar, I never want anybody to believe a word I'm saying, but to just go do your own research. And so what happened was, a lot of people don't know that before white Europeans, you know, white Caucasians enslaved Africans, we were enslaved by the Arab Caucasians. Yes, they're Caucasians, okay? And so that was the first thing that happened. So they brought their beliefs and their religion, and we started to disassociate ourselves with who we once were. And I always talk about how the #1 law of an African is to know thyself. So if we don't know thyself, if we don't know who we are, we're going to fall. This is actually one of the 48 laws of power. Is if we get put in isolation and we don't know who we are, and we're, you know, disconnected, we will be conquered. And so what happens was, as these Eurasians started to come in and intermingle with the population, they started to breed. And this is where we have the mulattoes. This is where mulattoes come from. Now, in the US and other places, there's something called the one-drop rule, which means that if you have an ounce of African blood in you, you are considered black. In Africa, especially in Upper Africa, North Africa, where we can observe that the population is pretty much white, it was the complete opposite. The offspring of the conquerors that were mulattoes, that had white blood from their patriot clan or patrial lineage from their dad's side, they were viewed as white. Even though they were, you know, half and half, they were viewed as white. So they were viewed as a superior race, and they started to adopt those thoughts and ideologies. And so what happened was, as time went on, the half-breeds, so to speak, started to mix with other whites, other half and halves. And so they literally at one point became more Eurasian than they were African, because they bred it out of them. And so now this is why you can observe people in Morocco and Egypt, and you can look at them and be like, they're not black, like they're so mixed. They look very interesting, but they're more European or Eurasian than they are African. And this is why. And so with the mulattoes being perceived as upper class, you know, and you know, superior, they used the mulattoes to conquer Africans like myself, dark-skinned, black, Kemetu Africans. Now, don't get me wrong, there were mulattoes that identified more with the African heritage and, you know, identity, that actually fought against the Eurasians coming in and conquering and raping, enslaving, and colonizing. But the majority of them chose to take their privilege as half and half, but be perceived as white and superior. And so you take that and you understand that with that mindset, with that cancerous mindset, they were able to impress upon the people through religion and other force tactics that they were inferior, that they had to worship this God, that they had to worship that God, that they had to denounce all the spiritual practices of their ancestors. And so you do this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you have where we are right now. It's a lot more deeper than that, but I wanted to make it more simple, and I didn't want to make it too lengthy for the purposes of this video, but I wanted to kind of summarize it all for you and make it quick. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments, make sure to comment down below, and let's get a healthy adult discussion going on. And as I always say, don't believe me, go do your research and come back here and fact check me. It is not my job to make you research or make you believe me. I'm just here to make you think a little bit and do the research. And so when you observe history and you observe how we were able to be infiltrated by trade, religion, missionaries, and things of that nature, and be conquered from our own, including mulattoes that had our blood but that were not fully us, you can understand how we became conquered, especially with us not even all speaking the same language. We spoke many different languages. And so this is why I always bring up the story of Haitians. They took many different slaves from many different tribes and areas and brought them to the island of Hispaniola, and it took Haitians over 150 years to create one language they could understand, Creole. And then once they could all speak and were on one accord, they were able to successfully revolt and kill over 50,000 Frenchmen to create Haiti, aka the Kingdom of Haiti, and you know, become the first major successful black independent republic. All right, and so that's all for this video, family. If Africans were so great, how did we get conquered? We have to understand this. All right, so stay blessed.